hey, we're here to do a roots review of the spine. This is going to be much less about spine exercises and more about an internal understanding of where your spine is in place while you do everything, and also leaving your spine alone. I always get people asking me, should I be tucking? Should I be doing this, that? And usually my answer is, or nothing. We don't need to clench or force or hold, squeeze, etc. our spine into a certain position all the time, or our shoulder blades together, or our hips squeezing into place. Sometimes it's about learning true control, which lets things relax and just sit to the side of the movement that we're doing. One thing that I see happening all the time is this very subtle kind of dumping into the spine. A lot of times this will be pathologized, meaning, made into a diagnosis, a problem, as an anterior pelvic tilt. But it's not really about the tilt of the pelvis so much, it's about a compression or additional focal load in the spine. And so a compensation as far as a cue to alleviate some of the pressure might be to kind of like tuck into this posterior pelvic tilt or butt under, however we want to call it, and that'll feel alleviating. Not because it's a problem with our pelvis, but actually because we've been accumulating load and they're related to each other, and the load is actually here on the spine. The other piece is the ribs. So a lot of times we're going to see these two things come together. I see this all the time in Pilates classes, telling people to tuck and then knit their ribs together. And this is a very forceful position. It's really even hard for me to breathe and talk while I do it. That's a little bit different than just kind of hanging out in a more neutral alignment. And the neutral alignment is more about alleviating the load that's focally placed on one level and dispersing it across the spine. It's got tons of levels. I think it's 27 levels. I will double check that number, from the base of your skull to the bottom of your tailbone. And every single one of those levels has a role, but need to be dispersed evenly and separated. So to use this dowel as a demonstration, the dowel will represent kind of like a straight spine. And you'll notice that the back of my neck doesn't touch the pole, neither does my lower back. That's a normal curve for the spine. There should be these kind of 3 points of contact at the back of my head, between my shoulder blades, and at my sacrum here between my cheeks. The other areas shouldn't touch, but something that a lot of people struggle with is creating nuanced changes on our spine. So one of the exercises that I like to be able to educate on is, without leaving your shoulders, your head, anything from the dowel, or this could also be my back against the wall, I want to see if we can not try to flatten our whole lower back to the spine, to the dowel or to the wall, but to just create a change in only that area. This is similar to a bridge roll-up exercise that I like to teach, as we're just using something external to us that we can feel to help us understand how we're moving. But again, we have to get nuanced, so we don't want to just be crunching and pulling ourselves into these positions. If I try to have someone align their spine a little bit better and I see their shoulders coming forward, well, we've now started moving something else. This isn't truly kind of centralizing the spinal position, it's just changing it. And that may come with an opening or a relief on the spine, but this isn't a very functional position to live life in. So we don't want to take one kind of maladaptive position for another. We want to try to find the nuance in between them. This comes into play when we do any exercises. So if I show you the difference between me doing an overhead press or having weights just above my head, people who don't have full shoulder range of motion or don't understand how to control their spine position tend to do them here with their kind of ribs flared a little forward, butt flared a little back. And that's going to, again, accumulate just a little bit of stress on our spine. And part of this spinal alignment, which is kind of bringing your ribs over top of your pelvis as we do them, would look like that. So again, it's a super small movement, but it puts the weights underneath me. If I don't actually have the shoulder range of motion to take it purely from my shoulder, and instead I start to have no choice but to use my spine, then the best adjustment is actually going to be to not work purely overhead and to move into an incline bench position. On my incline bench position, because the weights, still in line with gravity, are now just in front of me, you can see now kind of by my ears, by my cheekbones rather than by my ears, my spine's going to be in more of a relaxed position. but I can still abuse my spine from this position. So it's not about waiting for a certain exercise to control the force going onto our spine. It's about understanding how load goes into it. So the first skills are knowing that there's a difference. And oftentimes we start with these kind of larger tilting movements, and we're starting to get a sense of the entire region. But then we need to break it down into nuance. What is the difference between moving each one of these segments individually? And something like a segmental cat-cow, where we're really practicing controlling each segment by itself, can be super valuable, but only as valuable as our understanding and how to translate that into our loaded movements. Another exercise that I love using is a seated good morning, because the goal is to leave our spines alone and be able to truly just flex and extend, bend and straighten from the hips, leaving this riding along with us, but not actually moving. What I see happen all the time is that as people flex their hips, they start to pop their chest, which is a focal extension on the spine. And then when we go to come back up, they tend to do one of these, which ends up loading that area a little bit more. So again, it's never about the exercise in and of itself. It's about our ability to control those ranges individually. The seated good morning I like because it's got a lot in common with something like a lunge. Again, can we leave our spine alone and move through different exercises? An extra piece that comes into play here is the cue that I always see instructors giving, which is be up straight, vertical, proud chest, things like that. And they don't necessarily understand that they're encouraging a maladductive spinal position. If we watch, coming through, that's a lot different than allowing ourselves to hinge from the hip and leave the spine out of it.